Black Girl was called on stage to sing as a joke. Then she opened her mouth and silenced the judges. Her voice didn't sound human. It started soft like a breath. Then it grew. No, exploded, rising above the murmurs, over the squeaks of the folding chairs, even above the sarcastic laughter of the boys who dared her to come up in the first place. The room stilled. Then it shook. The notes poured out of her like they'd been locked inside for years. Clean, raw, and so full of pain it burned your throat just to hear it. The judges, who had been whispering and smirking only second before, were now frozen. One of them even mouthed, "What the hell?" as if asking someone else would make sense of it. She wasn't just singing. She was bleeding, screaming without screaming, telling a story no one knew they needed to hear, until she gave them no choice. And the look on her face, it wasn't just focus. It was something deeper, something haunted. That's when the girl at the piano, the one who'd been playing for everyone, suddenly stopped. She turned to stare. The notes died mid-chord, but the voice didn't need them anymore. Silence filled the auditorium when she finished, the kind of silence that crushes your chest. And then she said it, just one sentence, quiet and sharp as a knife. "I wasn't supposed to survive." The room fell into a stunned hush, and I turned toward the judges. One of them stood up, mouth open. "Who are you?" Keep watching to find out what happened next, and why no one saw it coming. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Trust me, you're going to want to hear the whole story. It started the way it always does, with a dare. 8th period, first week of junior year. Crowded hallway, loud lockers, gum stuck to the ceiling. The posters for the annual Westbridge High Talent Show were everywhere, printed in neon colors that screamed, "This is your moment." Tiana Graves didn't have a moment. She didn't want one. She barely wanted to be seen. She kept her head low, hoodie up, earbuds in. The music wasn't even playing. It hadn't been for months. She just wore them like armor now, noise-canceling the world. Everyone knew Tiana, sort of, black girl, always alone, transferred in last year. Quiet, weird, walks like she's listening to a different song than the rest of the school. No friends, no clubs, no drama. She existed like a shadow. If people talked about her, it was only in passing. No one ever really saw her. Until today. It happened in the cafeteria. Dante, the kind of boy who lived off other people's attention, had decided to be bored. That was always dangerous. He and his group, 5 loud boys with too much time and not enough sense, were cracking jokes about the talent show. "You should audition, Dante," one of them teased. "Do a magic trick, like make your GPA disappear." Dante laughed too loud. Then his eyes scanned the tables. Looking, hunting. His gaze landed on Tiana. "Yo, what about her?" he said, grinning. "I bet she got pipes." The boys turned, looked her up and down. "Nah, she's too quiet," one said. "Probably listens to whale noises or some creepy stuff." Another added. Dante stood, tray in hand. He walked straight over to her. "Hey," he said, tapping the table. "You gonna try out?" Tiana looked up slowly. Her eyes were calm, but unreadable. "No," she said. Dante tilted his head. "Why not? You look like you could sing." She blinked once. "You don't know me." That made the table behind him laugh. The girls watching leaned in. Someone started recording. You could feel it building. Dante smirked. "Come on, don't be shy. I dare you to try out." "I don't do dares," she said, going back to her barely touched apple. "That's too bad," he said, "because now you have to." And just like that, it spread. By 6th period, the whole school was whispering that quiet Tiana's gonna sing at auditions. By 7th, someone had already photoshopped her into a meme. By 8th, it was official. Her name was on the sign-up sheet. She hadn't put it there. She went home that night and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her room was still half-packed, even though they'd been in this town for almost a year. She hadn't hung up the posters in her closet. The keyboard under her bed had dust on it. She hadn't sung in 438 days. The last time she sang, her mother was alive. She didn't tell anyone what she was planning. Not the counselors. Not her history teacher, who always asked too many questions. Not even the kid who sat next to her in English and sometimes gave her half his bag of chips. She just showed up to auditions the next day like it was any other Thursday. Hoodie, jeans, same earbuds. The auditorium was cold and half empty. The judges sat in a row, sipping coffees and scrolling their phones. The students who had already auditioned hung around whispering, giggling, waiting to see if the joke girl would actually go up. Tiana waited in the back row. She said nothing. Then they called her name. Next, Tiana Graves. Somebody laughed, a low chuckle that rolled through the audience like a dare in itself. Tiana stood up slowly, walked to the stage like it was something she'd done before. The pianist didn't even ask her what song, just looked at her, bored, waiting. "I don't need music," Tiana said. The pianist shrugged and turned back to her sheet music. Tiana stepped up to the mic. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she closed her eyes and opened her mouth. They didn't know she was trained. They didn't know her mother had been a vocal coach, one of the best in Atlanta. They didn't know she'd spent her childhood in recording studios, or that she used to sing backup for gospel artists before she was old enough to drive. They didn't know her mother died in a fire. They didn't know Tiana had been in the house when it happened. And they definitely didn't know that her voice had gone silent ever since, not just in music, but in everything. Until now. When she finished, she didn't wait for applause. She didn't smile. She didn't say thank you. She just looked at the judges. One of them had tears in their eyes. Another just stared at the audition sheet, like her name might rewrite itself into something they recognized. And the boy who dared her to do it? He couldn't meet her gaze. She walked off the stage. And that's when everything changed. They didn't clap. Not because she wasn't good, God, she was better than good. But because the moment felt too big for something as small as applause. You don't cheer at a funeral. You don't high-five in church. And whatever just happened on that stage, it was both. Tiana stepped down into the aisle, face blank, eyes forward. She didn't glance at the audience. She didn't look for Dante. She didn't have to. She felt the stares trailing her like shadows, some stunned, some sorry, some suddenly afraid they'd misjudged her. She kept walking. Behind her, the pianist finally said something. She didn't even tell me her key. One of the judges stood. "What's her last name again?" "Graves," someone answered. Another pause. "Of course it is." When she reached the hallway, her breath caught. Not from nerves, from memory. The stage lights had brought it all back, the smell of melting cables, the screaming, the black smoke clawing at the ceiling. And her mother, always her mother, standing at the piano with her hands stretched out. "Just sing, baby," she'd said through the chaos. "If you can still sing, you're still here." Tiana had tried. Her voice cracked on the first note. The ceiling collapsed before the second. It took them 3 hours to dig her out. She hadn't sung since. Until now. She made it to the bathroom and locked the stall door. Her hands were shaking. Not because of the song. Because it felt like she'd dug up a part of herself she thought was dead, and now it was screaming to stay alive. A knock at the stall door startled her. "Tiana." It was Ms. Rhodes, the music teacher. Small, tightly wound, hair pulled back like she was always late to something important. I just saw you on stage." Silence. That was, "Tiana, we didn't know. Why didn't you ever say you could sing?" Tiana wiped her eyes on her sleeve. "Didn't matter." "It does matter." A pause. "Would you consider?" "I'm not joining anything," she snapped. Ms. Rhodes didn't leave. Her voice softened. "They're still talking about it, you know? Everyone. You stopped the whole room." Tiana didn't respond. She waited. After a few seconds, the footsteps faded. She stayed in the stall until the bell rang. At home, her aunt was watching game shows again. The volume was too loud, the blinds still closed. Plates stacked in the sink. Tiana stepped over a laundry basket and slipped into her room. Her aunt barely looked up. "How was school?" "Fine," Tiana lied. No way she was telling her. No way she was opening that box again. Her aunt meant well, sure. But she'd been distant ever since Tiana moved in. There was love there, probably, but no time, no closeness. Just a tired woman with too many shifts and not enough peace. Tiana knew that look in her eyes. It was the same one she saw in the mirror most mornings. Survival. Later that night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Dante. Yo, that was insane today. I didn't know you could actually sing. Dante, you're like famous now, LMAO. She didn't answer. Then, 10 minutes later, another message. Dante, seriously though, why'd you keep it a secret? She stared at the screen. Then typed, Tiana, because no one ever asks anything real. She deleted it. Typed again. Tiana, because it wasn't safe. Deleted. In the end, she just turned her phone off. The next day, she walked into school, and everything felt off. Eyes followed her. Some smiled. Others just stared, too afraid to speak. A few whispered. Not mean, but curious. Like she was a puzzle they were trying to solve. She made it to her locker before someone blocked her path. Dante. He looked different now, like someone had replaced the smugness with something else. Guilt? Awe? She couldn't tell. Hey, he said. For real. I was just messing around yesterday. I didn't think. I know, she said. He nodded. But, like you killed it. You're amazing. She looked him in the eye for the first time. So what now? He blinked. What do you mean? You dared me to audition as a joke. I did. It worked. Everyone's shocked. So what now? Do I go back to being invisible, or do you want a selfie first? He didn't answer. She didn't wait. The next week was a slow unraveling. The audition video had been uploaded to the school's talent show page. Then someone posted it on TikTok. By Friday, it had over 60,000 views. People from other schools started following her. A few teachers pulled her aside, told her they'd never seen anything like it. And still, she didn't talk about it. Didn't join choir. Didn't go to callbacks. Didn't even watch the video. She walked through the halls like nothing had changed. But things had changed. Something inside her had been shaken loose. And not just the music. Memories kept creeping in. The sound of her mom laughing during vocal warm-ups. The smell of burning plastic. The paramedic whispering, "You're lucky to be alive." She buried all of that. Now it was clawing its way back up. Worse than that, someone else was digging, too. She found the envelope taped to her locker on Monday morning. No name, no stamp, just her name in black marker. Tiana Graves. Inside a photo. Old, faded, curled at the edges. Her mother at the piano, smiling. And Tiana beside her, maybe 8 years old, mid-note, eyes closed in joy. Behind them, barely visible, a shadow. A man. No face. Just a silhouette in the doorway. On the back, a message written in block letters. Some voices never stay buried. She spun around. No one was there. The hallway buzzed with the usual morning shuffle. But now, everything felt sharpened. Someone knew. Someone remembered. The fire had been ruled accidental. Everyone said so. Everyone believed it. Tiana had believed it too. Until now. This story is just getting started. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the truth hiding behind the song. That night, Tiana didn't sleep. She lay in bed with the photo on her chest, the ceiling fan slicing shadows across the walls. The image played over and over in her mind. Her mom at the piano, young Tiana mid-song, and that dark blur standing in the doorway. She flipped the photo again. Some voices never stay buried. Who sent it? Why now? And how the hell did they get this picture? She hadn't seen it in years. It had been in a photo album that burned in the fire. Her heart clenched. No one outside her family had ever even been in that house. Unless, no, that was impossible. That man was dead. Wasn't he? Tiana didn't tell her aunt. She thought about it. Stood in the doorway of the kitchen while her aunt rinsed dishes and mumbled at the TV. Everything okay? Her aunt asked without turning. Tiana hesitated. The words caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak and closed it again. Yeah, she said. Just tired. The next day at school, things kept shifting under her feet. Every conversation paused when she walked past. A few girls from the senior choir smiled at her like they'd always known her. A teacher in the hallway gave her a wink and said, "Rising star," but it all felt wrong. Offbeat, like a song in the wrong key. She kept her head down and went straight to her locker. The moment she opened it, her stomach dropped. Another envelope. Same black marker. No name. This time inside a cassette tape. No label. Just the tape. Who even owned a cassette player anymore? She stuffed it into her bag and slammed the locker shut. And right then, she felt it again. A gaze. She whipped around. Nothing. Just the crowd. Just faces. One of them looking too long. Too hard. After school, she took 2 buses across town to an old thrift shop near where her mom used to teach lessons. The place hadn't changed in years. Still smelled like dust and pine cleaner. Still had the same bald cat sleeping on the counter like it paid rent. She walked in and asked the clerk, "You got a cassette player?" He blinked. "You serious? Do I look like I'm joking?" He pointed her to a back shelf. 10 minutes and $15 later, she had a second-hand Walkman and fresh batteries. She stuffed it all in her bag and left. She didn't play the tape until she was home, alone in her room, door locked, headphones on. The hiss of the tape started immediately, old, degraded, warped. Then a voice. Not hers. Not her mom's. A man's voice. Ragged. Familiar in the worst way. You think you buried it. But you only buried yourself. Then silence. Then music. A piano. A slow chord progression. Minor key. Something she'd sung to once. Then a girl's voice began to hum, faint, afraid, unfinished. Her own voice. Tiana ripped the headphones off and slammed the stop button. Her hands were shaking again. She hadn't heard that recording in over 3 years. She never told anyone it existed. That night, her aunt knocked once, then entered her room holding a grocery bag. "Brought you some ramen," she said. Tiana nodded. "Thanks." Her aunt lingered, eyes scanning, frowning. "You okay, baby?" "Yeah." "You sure?" Tiana hesitated, then held up the tape player. "Do you remember this?" Her aunt took one look at it and stepped back. Her face changed, like she'd seen a ghost. "Where'd you get that?" "It was left in my locker." Her aunt looked like she might drop the bag. "Throw it away." "What?" "Throw it out, Tiana. Right now." Tiana stood. "You know what it is, don't you?" Her aunt didn't answer. Tiana pressed. "Who was in that photo?" "The man in the doorway." "Don't do this." "Why not?" "Because some things are meant to stay buried." Tiana's voice cracked. "Like Mom." Her aunt flinched. "I deserve to know." Tiana whispered. "What happened?" "All of it. The fire wasn't an accident, was it?" Her aunt backed toward the door. "I don't know what you've gotten into, but you need to leave this alone." "I can't." "Tiana." "I heard his voice on that tape." Silence. Then, barely audible, "He's dead, Tiana. That's the only reason you're still alive." Then she left the room and didn't come back. Tiana didn't sleep again. She pulled the old keyboard out from under her bed, dusted it off, plugged it in. She didn't know what she was looking for. But her fingers remembered something her mind didn't. A melody. A broken lullaby. She played it again and again until her fingers ached. Until her heart felt like it would break open, and just when she thought she might collapse under the weight of it, she heard the knock. Not at the bedroom door, at the window. She froze, slowly turned. There outside the glass was a shadow. Not a face, not a form, just a figure, half lit by the street lamp. Watching her, unmoving, waiting. She stumbled back, heart hammering, and on the fogged-up glass, a single word appeared, written in slow, deliberate strokes from the outside. "Sing. Don't look away. It's only just begun. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the truth waiting in the silence." The words smeared into the glass like blood in water. "Sing." Tiana's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, heart pounding, expecting the shadow to vanish like a trick of the light. But it didn't. It stood there, watching, waiting. She lunged for the lamp on her nightstand and flicked it on. Light spilled over the room, but when she turned back, the window was empty. The figure was gone. Only the word remained. A trail of fog where a finger had dragged it. One syllable that now felt like a threat. She didn't sleep. Again. Didn't even try. She sat cross-legged on the floor with the cassette player in her lap, the photo beside her, the keyboard at her knees. By morning, the word on the glass had faded, but her nerves hadn't, and in her chest, that low, eerie hum from the tape echoed like a warning bell. It was her voice. She remembered now, but just barely. It had been a test run, a demo her mom made her sing, never meant to be public, never shared. Only her mom had the tape, or so she thought. So, who had it now? And why were they trying to bring her voice back from the grave? At school, everything pressed in tighter. More stares, more whispers, more people trying to make her into something she wasn't. Are you doing the show? Can you teach me to sing like that? Are you going viral? My cousin in Florida saw your video. But something had shifted in Tiana's eyes. People sensed it, even if they didn't know what to call it. She wasn't just quiet anymore. She was listening, watching, and on edge. She ducked into the library at lunch, headphones in, but no music playing. Just silence. She needed to think. Ms. Rhodes found her in the corner, scribbling notes into a spiral notebook like her life depended on it. Tiana, the music teacher said soft, "You're still on the callback list. If you want the solo slot, it's yours." "I didn't come to school to be a sideshow," she muttered. "You weren't." "I was set up." Ms. Rhodes crouched beside her. "Whatever the reason you went up there, that voice came from you. That's real. You can't fake that kind of power." Tiana looked away. Power doesn't protect people. Silence. Then, "Tiana, what are you afraid of?" She almost answered, almost told her about the photo, the tape, the window, almost asked her if she remembered a man named Carson Lee. But instead she said, "I'm not afraid. I'm remembering." Ms. Rhodes frowned. Remembering what? Everything. That night, Tiana snuck into her aunt's closet. She didn't want to, she needed to. She found the old box under winter coats and dusty luggage. It had been sealed with duct tape and sharp letters that said, "Do not open Fire Records." Her aunt hadn't even looked through it since they moved. Tiana dragged it into her room and locked the door. Inside, scorched papers, blackened sheet music, a half-burned notebook with her mom's name inside the cover, a cracked photo frame with their faces frozen in glass-smudged joy, and then at the bottom a newspaper clipping, singed at the corners. Vocal coach killed in suspicious fire, arson not ruled out. Below the headline, a grainy black-and-white photo of the wreckage. Her house. The front steps gone. The roof collapsed, and next to the article, stapled like someone wanted it to be found, a copy of a restraining order, filed by her mother, against Carson Lee, her old vocal partner. Tiana stared at the name, her hands suddenly ice-cold. She remembered him now. Barely. He used to come by for rehearsals, always smiling, always too loud, the kind of man who called you kiddo but said it like a warning. She remembered the day he got kicked out, the yelling, the door slam, and then he was gone. Her mom had never explained, only said, "That man will never come near you again. Promise me you won't sing if he ever finds you." Tiana was 7. She promised, and now someone was dragging all of it back up. The next morning, she skipped school. She took a bus downtown holding the photo and the tape in her backpack like evidence. The Atlanta Recorder's office sat between a vape shop and a boarded-up smoothie place. She walked in, heart racing, and went straight to the front desk. "I need to see your archives," she told the woman there. Specifically, anything from the fire on Whitmore Street. March 2nd, 3 years ago. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Family?" Tiana nodded once. "It was my mom." 3 hours later, Tiana sat in front of an ancient microfiche reader, scrolling through old police reports and local news blurbs. Most of it repeated the same story. Faulty wiring. Accidental ignition. Mother dead, daughter rescued. No foul play confirmed. But then she found it, buried in a footnote on page 6 of a weekly crime report. Unconfirmed tip suggested known stalker Carson Lee may have been seen in the area days before the fire. No surveillance footage recovered. Witness statement retracted. Retracted. Someone had backed down, or been forced to. Tiana stared at the screen until her eyes burned. The fire hadn't just killed her mother. It had buried the truth. And someone had made damn sure it stayed buried. Until now. That night, she returned home and found her room ransacked. Drawers pulled out. Closet open. The old tape player smashed on the floor. On her bed, another photo. Her again. Taken this week. A picture of her standing outside the music room. On the back, stop singing. Or the next fire won't wait. You're not ready for what's next. Like, comment and subscribe so you don't miss the secrets that were meant to die with her mother. Tiana's not backing down, and neither should you. The picture fell from her shaking hands. Tiana backed away from her bed, like it might explode. Her room was still, too still, but every part of her felt hunted. Her drawers were gutted, her clothes tossed like garbage, and the Walkman that held the only proof she had shattered. Pieces scattered across the rug like bones. But it was the photo that undid her. That angle, that moment, whoever took it had been close, watching her. The picture was crisp, sharp, not from some old camera, from a phone, recent, maybe hours ago. Her skin crawled. Someone had been right there, at school, in the building, and they'd gotten into her room, her home. She couldn't breathe, not from fear, but fury. The rage hit first, then the panic. Because whoever they were, they didn't want money. They didn't want fame. They wanted silence. They wanted her silence. And they were getting more desperate, which meant she was getting close. Her aunt came home 2 hours later and found the front door wide open. Tiana hadn't moved. She was still sitting on the edge of her bed, eyes locked on the picture. What the hell? Her aunt froze in the doorway. Tiana lifted the photo without looking away. This was in here, on my bed, after someone tore the room apart. Her aunt snatched the picture from her. Read the back. Went pale. Oh my God. You said he was dead, Tiana said, voice hollow. I thought he was. Tiana stood now, slow and steady, but you weren't sure. I tried, Tiana. I did everything I could to protect you. After the fire, they told us he was gone. That he disappeared. And I believe them. We all did. You knew this was about him? I suspected, her aunt said quietly, but I wanted to let you have a normal life. No shadows, no fear, no more music. That was the deal. What deal? Tiana's voice sharpened. Her aunt hesitated. You promised my mom, Tiana said, realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. Didn't you? I did. So, all this time, you weren't just being strict. You were keeping me quiet. I was keeping you safe. Tiana stared at her. By making me disappear? Her aunt sat down heavily on the bed. The creak of old springs filled the room. I lost my sister in that fire, Tiana. I couldn't lose you too. Tiana's hands curled into fists. Well, it's too late. They know I'm singing again, and they're not backing off. Her aunt looked up. Then neither can we. They drove to the police station that night. The officer on duty, a tired woman with a caffeine problem and a badge that didn't shine anymore, listened carefully. She took the pictures, took notes. But when Tiana mentioned Carson Lee, the officer tensed. I remember that name, she said. Fire on Whitmore Street, right? Music teacher? That case was never officially closed. A lot of missing pieces. Tiana leaned forward. I have a photo of him. From before. From inside the house. The officer raised an eyebrow. Can we see it? She pulled out the original picture from her backpack, the one with the shadowy man in the doorway. The officer studied it closely. I'll run it through our old records, she said. But if what you're saying is true, this goes deeper than a break-in. It already is deeper, Tiana said. And whoever this is, they're not just watching. They're waiting for me to step into the spotlight again. The officer looked at her aunt. You got somewhere safe to stay tonight? Her aunt hesitated. Tiana answered for her. We'll figure it out. They slept at a motel off the highway. The carpet was threadbare, the walls smelled like mildew, and the only light flickered when you turned on the AC. But it was quiet. And for now, that was enough. Tiana sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through her mom's old emails on a backup account she'd hacked into months ago, but never touched, until now. She typed Carson Lee into the search bar. 2 hits. Both emails were from a lawyer. Both from the same month her mom filed the restraining order. The first, "We need to talk about Carson. He's still claiming the rights to your joint songs. If he doesn't back off, we file." The second, "He threatened to ruin what she loves most. I'm advising you take this seriously. Please, let me contact the authorities." What she loved most, Tiana. That's why her mom pulled her out of performances. That's why she stopped recording. That's why she promised. The next morning, Tiana checked her phone. 3 new messages, all unknown numbers. The first was a voice memo. She didn't play it. Not yet. The second was a picture. Her school locker. Open. Empty. The third was a message. "We warned you. You sing again and she burns too." Tiana didn't show her aunt. She didn't go back to school. She packed a bag, grabbed her keyboard, and left. She knew where she had to go. The old studio. It was still there, tucked between an abandoned shoe repair and a pawn shop. Her mother had taught voice lessons there for 6 years. The front sign was faded now, barely legible, but the inside still smelled like sheet music and black coffee. She had the key. Her mom used to keep a copy in a flower pot outside. It was still there. She opened the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind her. No cameras, no people, just the piano in the center of the main room, covered with a drop cloth and dust. Tiana walked up to it, pulled the cloth off, and ran her fingers across the keys. Then she sat, and she played. Not the old song, not the lullaby. Something new, something raw, a melody wrapped in warning. A cry turned into music. She pressed record on her phone, because if she was going to sing again, she wanted the whole damn world to hear it. They threatened her. They tried to silence her. They broke into her home, but they didn't know. The fire didn't destroy her voice. It forged it. Outside, across the street, a man watched from a parked car. Dark glasses, unshaven jaw. In his lap, an old cassette tape. In his hand, the list. Only one name left at the bottom. Tiana Graves. He smiled and pressed play. The silence is over. Tiana's voice is rising, and the people trying to stop her are watching. Don't miss what's coming. Like, comment, and subscribe, because now she's singing back. Tiana's voice filled the old studio like smoke, slow, creeping, impossible to ignore. She sat hunched over the piano, her fingers shaking slightly over the keys, but the sound that came out of her throat was sharp as broken glass. This wasn't a song for talent shows. This wasn't for TikTok. This wasn't for applause. This was a warning, a reckoning, resurrection. She sang what she remembered, scraps of a lullaby her mom used to hum when dishes dried and streetlights buzzed and the world outside was still. She layered it with new chords, her own melody, a haunting chorus no one had ever heard before, one that burned. Every word was loaded with memory. Every breath dragged something buried back into the light. She didn't cry, not this time. She just sang. And as her voice swelled and the phone in her pocket recorded every second, she knew, somewhere, someone would hear this and understand. This wasn't about music anymore. This was about truth. And the people who killed her mother were going to hear it whether they wanted to or not. Across the street, the man in the parked car sat motionless. The cassette player in his lap clicked to a stop. He didn't rewind it. He didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached down and turned off the ignition. The car fell silent. Inside the glove box sat a file. On the cover, Tiana Graves, active. Inside, photos, receipts, class schedules, maps. A voice memo labeled simply, March 2nd, Whitmore. His hand hovered over it. Instead, he pulled out a new envelope and wrote something in thick block letters. Final warning. Then he placed it on the dashboard. The wind outside kicked up. He smiled. Back in the studio, Tiana ended the song on a long, aching note. The sound lingered in the room. It echoed. It waited. And when it finally faded, she sat back in silence, breathing hard. Her chest ached. Her fingers trembled. But her fear? It was gone. She stopped the recording on her phone. Saved the file. Backed it up 3 times. She wasn't going to let this one burn. Not again. She stood, shoved her keyboard and phone into her bag, and pulled the studio's blinds shut. She needed to move. Fast. Quiet. She turned toward the door and froze. Another envelope. This one had been slid under the door while she was singing. She hadn't heard it, hadn't seen anyone. But there it was. Final warning. Her fingers hovered above it. She picked it up, slowly, carefully. Inside, a printed screenshot. A paused video of her in the studio tonight from inside the room. Camera angle high, like it had been recorded from a vent or a corner of the ceiling. Tiana dropped the photo and backed up, eyes flying to the corners of the room. Where, she whispered, spinning. Where the hell? And then she saw it. A black dot above the old bookshelf. Tiny, blinking red. A camera, watching her, recording. She didn't think. She grabbed her phone and bolted out the front door, barely locking it behind her. She ran 2 blocks before she stopped to breathe. Whoever it was, they weren't just following her. They were inside her past, inside the only place she thought was safe. And now, they had a recording of her song, her proof, her weapon. And if they got to it before she could, she fumbled her phone from her pocket, opened the voice memo, hit share, first to her school email, then to her backup account, then to Ms. Rhodes. Then, finally she hit upload to the same social media page that posted her audition. She added a caption. This song was meant to be buried, but it isn't dead. I know what happened, and I'm not scared anymore. And she pressed post. There was no taking it back now. An hour later, the video had 18,000 views. By morning, it would hit 70,000. By afternoon, a reporter from Channel 5 would message her asking for an interview. By evening, someone would try to erase the video and fail, because what was posted online couldn't be burned. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, Tiana was sitting on the floor of her aunt's bathroom, shaking, because after she hit post, a new message hit her inbox. No sender, no name, just one line. Meet me where the fire started. Midnight. Come alone, or someone else will pay. Attached, a grainy photo of her aunt leaving work, headphones in, back turned. Tiana stared at the screen, bile rising in her throat. Midnight, Whitmore Street, where the fire began, where her mother died. She had no choice now, no backup, no time. She was going back to the ashes, to end it, one way or another. Midnight's coming fast, and not everyone's walking away. Don't miss it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because where the fire started, someone's still watching. The ruins looked smaller than she remembered. Whitmore Street was nearly silent, just the distant hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Most of the old houses on the block had been demolished or boarded up. But her house, the blackened skeleton of it, still stood like a stubborn ghost. Tiana parked her aunt's car 2 streets over and walked the rest of the way. Every step echoed. The closer she got, the more her skin crawled. She could almost smell the smoke again, that metallic sting of melted wires and ash. The fire had hollowed it out, but the outline was still there, the porch where her mom used to sit with sweet tea, the living room window that shattered the night of the blaze, the corner where she'd hidden under a wet towel waiting for someone to find her. She tightened her hoodie, fists shoved deep into the pocket. Midnight. No sound but her own breathing. Where are you? She whispered to the dark. A light blinked on inside the wrecked house. A single flashlight beam, sweeping slowly across the floor. Tiana froze. Then a voice. Gravelly. Rough around the edges, but unmistakable. You made it. Her blood ran cold. Carson Lee. She couldn't see his face yet. Just the shadowed figure stepping deeper into the wreck. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hiding. He moved like a man who owned this place, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Tiana's instinct screamed to run. Every muscle tensed, but she stayed. You're her little girl, Carson said. Didn't think I'd ever hear that voice again. Why are you following me? She shot back, her voice sharper than she expected. What do you want? He laughed. A low, broken sound. What do I want? I want what your mother took from me. She thought she could lock me out, take the music, take everything and run. But she forgot one thing. He pointed at her, the flashlight beam slicing across her face. You have her voice. This isn't about music, Tiana said. Her chest ached, but she stood taller. This is about control. You burned our house down because she left you. Carson tilted his head, smiling without warmth. She made me do it. You can't just take something that doesn't belong to you. She was trying to protect me. The words echoed too loudly, bouncing off the broken walls. For a second, the flashlight lowered. He studied her, eyes glinting in the dark. You don't even know what you've got, do you? That voice, that's mine. I built it. I built her. And you're just the echo. No, she said, fists tightening in her pockets. I'm not your echo. I'm hers. And I'm done being quiet. Carson moved fast. 1 second he was 5 feet away. The next, he was close enough for her to smell the alcohol on his breath. He grabbed her wrist hard, like he meant to break it. You don't get to talk to me like. A sharp sound cut him off. Recording started. Tiana had hit the button on her phone's voice recorder. The red light glowed in the dark between them. Let go, she said, her voice steady now. Every word you say, it's going to the cops. It's already backed up. You touch me, and your whole life burns like this house. For a moment, silence stretched between them. His grip didn't loosen, but his eyes narrowed, calculating. Then he smiled. You're smart, like her. But you think this is over? You think a song's gonna save you? It already has, Tiana said, and she sang. Not a full song, just one note. Strong, unshaken, and louder than she thought possible. It startled him. He stumbled back, covering his ears like the sound itself was cutting him. She ran. The night split open as she sprinted down Whitmore Street, her breath ragged but her voice still ringing in her head. She didn't stop until she reached the car. By the time she glanced back, Carson was gone. The ruins were silent again, but she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. When she got home, her aunt was waiting on the porch, pale and shaking. Where the hell were you? She demanded. Tiana didn't answer. She handed her aunt the phone, still recording. I have his voice now. We can prove it. Her aunt stared at her, fear and pride mixing in her eyes. Tiana, he won't stop? Neither will I, she said, her voice sharp as steel. Then, almost like a whisper meant for herself, not this time. By the next morning, her recording had gone viral. Someone had clipped her confrontation with Carson, synced it with the song she posted, and turned it into a trending video, the voice that survived the fire. Her name was everywhere, and so was his. The police called before noon. They wanted everything she had, the photos, the tape, the messages. An investigation was opening. But Tiana knew Carson wasn't the kind of man who waited around to get caught. He'd come for her first. That night, she sat at the keyboard, staring at the keys but not touching them. The weight of it all sat heavy on her shoulders, her mother's ghost, the fire, the danger. She felt the fear creeping back, that old voice whispering to stay quiet. But she couldn't. Not anymore. She pressed one key, then another. The same song. Her song. She sang it under her breath, not for the world this time, just for herself, for her mother, for the girl who hid for 438 days, thinking her voice was gone. When she finished, a thought cut through the silence. The only way to beat him is to be louder than he ever imagined. She reached for her phone. If he wanted her quiet, he was about to get the opposite. She was going to sing live, not just for a school audition, not for a show, for everyone. But first, she needed one thing. Proof. Real proof that the fire wasn't an accident. And that meant going back to where she swore she'd never return. The old recording studio. The studio still smelled like dust and grief. Tiana stood in the doorway, her bag slung tight over her shoulder, heart pounding. The door's lock had been replaced since her last visit. Not by her, not by the owner, because the owner had been her mother, and no one legally claimed the place after she died. Someone else had been here, recently, and that someone had installed a new camera. She had 2 goals tonight: find the original tapes and find out who had access. She moved quickly, flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other. The hallway walls were lined with soundproofing foam, burnt orange and frayed with time. She knew this place by heart. She had done her homework here, learned to sing here, slept on that tiny couch when her mom had late-night sessions. The main studio room loomed ahead, and tucked behind the piano, right where she remembered, was the filing cabinet. Locked. Of course it was. She dropped her bag, pulled out a flathead screwdriver, and went to work. She'd never broken into anything before, but YouTube had taught her more in the last 2 days than school had in 2 years. It took 5 minutes. The drawer popped. Inside were rows of labeled cassettes. Her mom's handwriting. TG, first recording. Carson, L, harmony draft. Whitmore, pre-show Ray. Session 8, threat call. She paused. Threat call? She pulled it out, labeled in red ink. Not for playback. She slipped the tape into her backup player, the one she bought after Carson smashed the first, and hit play. The hiss of silence. Then the whine of static. Then her mother's voice. I'm recording this in case anything happens. Carson came by again today. He said things I can't repeat. He's not just after me now. He's after Tiana. He wants her to record with him. He said, if I don't agree, he'll burn it all down. He said she's mine for now, but not forever. Her mother's breath hitched. A long silence. I told him I'd never let him near her. But if this ends the way, I think it will. Promise me you'll never let her stop singing. Promise me she'll know it wasn't her fault. The tape clicked to a stop. Tiana sat frozen. The room was suddenly too small. The air too tight. Her mother knew. She'd left this behind like a lifeline. And now Tiana had it. A noise. Footsteps in the hallway. Tiana scrambled to her feet, heart hammering. She turned off the flashlight. Ducking behind the piano. She held her breath. The door creaked open. Heavy boots on the hardwood. Slow, deliberate. A figure moved past the piano. Flashlight sweeping. It wasn't Carson. Too tall. Too lean. Moving like he didn't know the place. Tiana stayed still. The man paused, scanning the walls. Pulled out his phone. Snapped a photo. Then he spoke. She's not here. But the tapes are gone. A pause. Listening. Then, I'll find her. She has until tomorrow. He turned and left. The door clicked shut. Tiana exhaled, knees weak. There's more than one. She stayed crouched until the flashlight beam disappeared down the street. Then she snatched the tapes, stuffed them in her bag, and ran. Back home, her aunt was pacing the living room, phone in hand. She looked up and didn't even ask. You got something, didn't you? Tiana nodded. She recorded him. Before the fire. Said everything. Even named him. Good God. I need to go public, Tiana said. Tomorrow. All of it. The song. The story. Everything. Her aunt didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said the words Tiana didn't expect. Then I'll be right there with you. The next morning, Tiana called Ms. Rhodes. I'm singing at the show tonight, she said. Not just singing. I'm telling everything. A pause. You sure you're ready for that? The teacher asked. No, Tiana said. But I'm doing it anyway. By 7 p.m., the auditorium was packed. Phones were out. Tripod set up. The internet was already buzzing. Rumors flew about the girl who sang once and went silent. The girl who posted a song and then vanished. The girl with a dead mother and a voice that made people cry in their cars. Backstage, Tiana stood in front of a cracked mirror. She wore black. Not to mourn, but to burn. She held the cassette tape in one hand, her mother's handwriting on the label, and in the other hand, her mic. She walked out to the stage, light catching her eyes, and stood in the silence. No introduction. No cue. Just a microphone. And her voice. She didn't sing right away. First, she spoke. This isn't a song you clap for. This is a song you listen to. My mother died in a fire. I used to think it was an accident, but it wasn't. Gasps from the crowd. Whispers. She held up the tape. This is proof. My mom recorded what happened. She knew who was after us. And now I'm telling the world. She took a breath. And then, she sang. It was the same melody from the studio, but this time it filled more than room. It filled a truth that couldn't be buried. Not by flames. not by fear. Each note carried grief, but also survival. And when the last chord hit, it wasn't quiet. It was thunder. The auditorium stood as one. Phones raised, tears shed, people holding hands without realizing it. And far in the back, in the shadows of the wings, Carson Lee stepped out and turned to run. But a hand caught his shoulder. The school security officer, flanked by 2 police. "You're done," the officer said. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Carson hissed. "Oh, I think we do," said a new voice. Tiana stepped into the wings, mic still in hand, tape held high, and the entire room followed her. Because this time, they heard everything. Justice has a soundtrack, and it just went live. Stick around. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tiana's not done yet. The moment Carson Lee was led out of the auditorium, everything broke loose. Reporters who had snuck into the back rows were suddenly pushing through the crowd. Students were crying, some from shock, some from something they didn't fully understand but still felt. Teachers whispered into walkie-talkies. A local news anchor who had arrived late was sprinting toward the stage like he'd missed a once-in-a-lifetime shot. And Tiana? She stood dead center, frozen under the spotlight. Not trembling, not hiding, just standing, quiet and unmovable, her mic still in hand. She hadn't rehearsed what came next. There was no script, but her voice carried like it was carved from stone. "That man," she said, looking toward the back where the officers had taken Carson, "stalked my mother, threatened her. He burned down our house with her inside it." Gasps rippled through the audience again. Some students stood, others sat stiff as statues. "She left a message for me. On tape. She warned me. And I didn't want to believe it, not at first. But it's real. I lived it. And for years, I let that fire decide who I was." Her throat tightened, but she kept going. "I stopped singing. I stopped trusting. I stopped feeling. But the truth is, I didn't lose my voice in that fire. I buried it, out of fear. And silence almost killed me." Now her voice grew stronger, clearer. "I'm done being afraid." A pause. She looked out at the sea of faces. Then, simple, clean, she said, "I have one more song." And she stepped back to the mic. No backing track. No instruments. Just her. And her mother's voice inside her. The lyrics didn't come from a notebook. They poured out like breath returning to lungs after years underwater. "I walked through the fire, but the fire made me gold. Every scar, every silence, every story I was told, tried to hush me, but I kept the embers warm. Now I sing with ashes on my skin. This is how I was reborn." The audience stood, not just from politeness, not for show. They stood because they had to. By the time she hit the last note, the entire room was swaying, crying, cheering, shaking their heads in disbelief. And somewhere in that crowd, Ms. Rhodes stood with both hands to her mouth. Her aunt sat in the front row, weeping silently. Tiana stepped away from the mic. No bow, just a look, out into the sea of people who had once overlooked her, and now couldn't look away. 30 minutes later, as police packed Carson into the cruiser, the first clip of her performance hit the internet. By morning, it had 4 million views. By noon, it hit national news. Headlines exploded. Teen survivor sings truth about arson in viral performance. Fire survivor's voice brings killer to justice. This is how I was reborn. The song that stopped a monster. Calls poured in. Record labels. Podcasts. Talk shows. But the most important one came from a woman named Geneva Thomas. She was a former attorney, now running a foundation for victims of abuse in the music industry. "I want to help," she told Tiana over the phone. "Not just with the case, with your story. You're not alone, and the world needs to hear what you've been through in your own words. Not polished, not managed, just true." Tiana agreed, but she set her own terms. No contracts, no handlers, no one else putting words in her mouth. Because for the first time in her life, her voice wasn't something to hide. It was something to fight with. The charges against Carson were filed within a week. Arson, manslaughter, harassment, tampering with evidence, illegal surveillance. More victims came forward. 2 other women, both singers, both with similar stories. Tiana wasn't the only one, but she was the first to speak, and that mattered. She returned to school 3 days later. Not in silence this time. She walked in and people moved, not away from her, toward her. Teachers stopped her just to say, "Thank you." Students, many she'd never even spoken to, left notes in her locker. Some apologized. Some just said, "You helped me." Dante even caught her in the hallway. He didn't say much, just looked at her and said, "I was an idiot." She raised an eyebrow. "Which time?" He laughed, nervous. "All of them." And that was enough. She still carried the tape, not because she needed it for proof anymore, because it reminded her of the promise her mom made, and the one Tiana kept: never stop singing. She didn't. But now, she was singing for more than just herself. She was singing for every kid who was told to sit down, for every voice forced into silence, and for the one that helped her find hers again. Tiana's not just surviving. She's rising. But fame has its own shadows, and not everyone's ready for a light. Like, comment, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. At first, it felt like flying. Tiana couldn't scroll more than a few seconds without seeing her face on reaction videos, TikTok edits, inspirational reels, even a clip spliced over footage of wildfire survivors and phoenixes rising from flames. Her inbox flooded. Agents, labels, nonprofits, celebrities she used to admire from a distance sent DMs, blue check marks, endorsement offers, invites to galas, and exclusive creative retreats. It was fast, too fast. Every interview wanted the same story. What was it like losing your mom? Did you know your voice was that powerful? Can you recreate the exact moment you realized the fire wasn't an accident? She kept answering with the same honesty, but a quiet weight grew behind her ribs with every headline. Fire girl finds her flame. Survivor songbird silences abuser. Teen tragedy turns into talent. They turned her grief into a brand. Turned her pain into a tagline. It wasn't until the morning her mom's voice showed up in an ad for noise-canceling headphones that Tiana realized what was happening. It was a 3-second clip from one of the old tapes, ripped from her public post. Just enough of her mom's voice to sell nostalgia, followed by a bass drop and a flashy slogan. Find your own voice. Tune out the noise. She dropped her phone. Then she threw it. Hard. It hit the wall and slid down, screen cracked. No one had asked. No one had gotten permission. The tape wasn't a product. It was a goodbye. A warning. And now it was content. That night, she found herself sitting outside the studio again. Not to rehearse. Not to fight, just to think. Everything had changed, and yet something still felt wrong. The world saw her as brave, strong, unshakable. But the truth was she was tired. Tired of being an icon. Tired of being someone's proof that pain could be repackaged. Tired of carrying a fire that had never really gone out. The door to the studio creaked open. Her aunt stepped out, a hoodie wrapped around her shoulders. "I figured you'd be here." Tiana didn't answer, just looked at the sky. "You okay, baby?" "I should be," Tiana whispered. "Everyone keeps telling me how proud they are. Like I won something, like surviving made me famous, and now I'm supposed to be grateful." Her aunt sat beside her on the steps. "You did survive," she said gently. "I know," Tiana said, "but sometimes I think people are more comfortable with the story of me than me." Her aunt didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, "They don't know the whole song. Just the chorus." Tiana looked at her. That landed. "They know what happened," her aunt continued, "but they don't know what it cost. They didn't see the nightmares. The quiet. The girl who didn't speak for almost a year. You gave them one note, and they tried to write your whole melody. That's not your fault." Tiana swallowed hard. "Then what is mine?" Her aunt smiled. The next verse. She didn't go online for 2 days. Instead, she wrote, not just music, letters, thoughts she'd never said out loud. She even wrote her mom, 3 pages, folded and placed inside the scorched notebook from the firebox. Then she turned back to music, but differently. Not for views, not for labels, for herself. She stopped taking meetings, stopped returning messages that sounded like contracts in disguise. And when her school's art department invited her to do a performance at the spring showcase, she said yes, but only if she could speak her own truth. Without edits, without polish. They agreed. The night of the performance, she stood center stage again. But this time, there were no viral cameras, no hashtags, just a room full of students, teachers, her aunt, Ms. Rhodes, the girl who used to pass her notes in Spanish class, the janitor who always called her baby genius. She sang a new song, one no one had heard, one she hadn't shared online. And when she finished, she didn't wait for applause. She looked out and said, "This song isn't about what I've survived. It's about what I'm still becoming." Silence. Then thunderous, real applause. Not for a headline, not for a trend, but for her. Backstage, Ms. Rhodes pulled her into a hug. "You changed the way people listen, Tiana." Not everyone. No, but the right ones. Later that night, alone in her room, Tiana opened her laptop. She created a new folder on her desktop, named it Unreleased for Me. She uploaded her newest demos. Rough, unmixed, unapologetically raw. She pressed play and smiled, because Rebirth? It's not an anthem. It's a quiet note that keeps building. One no one can take away. Not anymore. Tiana's writing her own future. But old shadows don't disappear without a fight. The past isn't done with her yet. Like, comment, and subscribe. You've come this far. Trust me, you'll want to hear how it ends. It started with a message. No name. No subject line. Just one sentence. You didn't find all the tapes. Tiana stared at the screen. Her pulse jumped, the room shrinking in around her. She was supposed to be done with this. She had faced Carson. She had gone public. She had turned grief into fire and stood tall in it. But some embers don't go out. They just wait. She clicked on a message. No link. No follow-up. Just a second line, appearing a few seconds later. Check the piano. Her blood turned to ice. Which piano? The house was gone. The studio was cleaned out. She'd checked everything. Unless her mother's old upright, the one that was moved to her aunt's garage after the fire, covered in tarps and boxes, untouched for years. Tiana was moving before she even finished the thought. The garage smelled like old oil, damp cardboard, and memory. Tiana shoved aside bins of holiday decorations and broken lawn tools until the tarp came into view. Her aunt hadn't wanted to get rid of it. Too heavy, she'd said. Too many memories. Tiana hadn't argued. She couldn't even look at it for a long time. Now, she peeled back the cover like she was opening a casket. The keys were dusty, they were chipped at the edges. But it was still hers. Still hers and her mother's. She lifted the lid and felt along the inside edge. Nothing. Checked under the seat. Empty. Then, finally, she opened the fallboard, the panel just above the keys. It stuck. She pulled harder. Click. A thin envelope fell out. Yellowed. Stiff with age. Her name on the front. Just her name. Tiana. Inside, a cassette. And a note in her mother's handwriting. If you're hearing this, it means he's not done. You need to finish what I couldn't. There's more. That was all. No instructions. No map. No signature. Tiana sat on the dusty bench. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her player. She slid the cassette in. Press play. A soft piano line filled her ears, something sad, aching. Not a rehearsal. Not a lesson. A confession. Then her mother's voice, slow and tired. I tried to stop him. I went to the police. I gave them everything, but they wouldn't listen. Not all of them. Someone was protecting him. Someone inside. Tiana felt her chest tighten. Her mother had never said that. Not even in the other tape. The voice continued. I think there's a file. Something he left at the studio. In the back closet. Locked. But I found a key. I hid it inside the metronome. Tiana bolted upright. The metronome. She knew the one. It had been packed away. She'd even seen it in the storage box, thought it was broken, and ignored it. She ran. 20 minutes later, she had the metronome cracked open on her bedroom floor. Inside, Taped to the base, a brass key. She didn't wait. She called Ms. Rhodes. I need to get into the studio. Tonight. The teacher didn't ask questions. The studio was dark. Ms. Rhodes waited at the front, keys in hand, face pale. I locked the back closet last year. No one's used it since your mom. Tiana nodded. Then that's where it is. They walked down the hallway, past the posters, past the rooms Tiana used to fall asleep in while her mom coached choir groups late into the night. She found the closet door. The key fit perfectly. Inside, dust, shelves of cables, a box labeled archives. She dug through it. Sheet music, old rehearsal notes, photos. Then she found a manila folder. Lee Carson. She opened it. Inside, printouts of emails, bank statements, venue contracts, voice memos transcribed, and most damning, a signed non-disclosure agreement between Carson Lee and a former board member of Westbridge High School. Tiana's breath caught. This was it. Proof that the school, her school, had helped cover for him. Years ago, before her mom died, a sticky note clung to one page. Burn after reading. She took photos of everything. Then she looked at Ms. Rhodes. I have to go public again. You sure? Her teacher said softly. Tiana stared at the file. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That night, she went live on her channel. No music, just her face. This is bigger than one man, she said into the camera. Carson Lee didn't work alone. He was protected, enabled, silenced. Not just me, not just my mother, but others. And I have proof. She held up the file. This ends now. Then she signed off. She didn't wait to see the views climb. She just turned off the light and sat in the dark, listening, not for applause, but for echoes. The next day, the district office called an emergency meeting. 2 board members resigned within the week. Investigations reopened, and the internet exploded again. But this time, Tiana wasn't just trending. She was leading, not a song, not a story, a movement, because her voice wasn't an echo anymore. It was a signal, and the world was finally listening. The truth is out, but healing has its own cost. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let's finish this together. Spring came late that year. Rain clung to the sidewalks like the season didn't know how to let go. Trees budded slowly, nervously, like they were waiting to see if it was safe. Tiana understood that feeling. It had been 4 weeks since she went live with the final evidence. For weeks since the school district opened its doors and let the truth walk in, swinging. For weeks since she stopped checking her phone every 10 minutes to see what else had cracked open. In that time, Carson Lee had been officially indicted. 2 board members were charged with obstruction and witness intimidation. Reporters kept calling. Producers wanted to turn her story into a documentary. She said no to most of it. She didn't need someone else to write her story anymore. She had already sung it. She sat now on the roof outside her bedroom window, hoodie pulled up, feet dangling. Below, the city moved on, cars passing, dogs barking, wind pressing against rooftops like a lullaby trying to find its rhythm. She held a copy of the final file in her lap. The folder that started it all, the one she almost burned, but couldn't. Her mother's voice was still on her phone. So was the song. The real one. The last one. The one she still hadn't released. Not because she was scared. Because she was waiting. Waiting to know that it would be more than just another viral moment. Waiting to feel ready. She'd learned something through all of this. The truth doesn't end a story. It begins one. Her aunt stepped out onto the roof, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. No words. She just sat beside her and handed one over. Tiana took a sip and smiled. You still make it too sweet. Her aunt shrugged. You still need it. They sat in silence for a while. Then her aunt asked the one question that had been sitting between them for weeks. So, what now? Tiana looked up at the stars. For once, they didn't make her feel small. She breathed in the night, then said, Now I live. The showcase was different this time. Not a performance, not an announcement, just a gathering. Tiana stood in front of a crowd, not as a survivor, not as the girl from the fire, but as herself. No spotlight, no microphone, Just her voice. I used to think singing was something I had to earn back, she said. But I never lost it. I just stopped believing it belonged to me. She paused. And now that I know it does, I want to share it. Not because I have to. Not because it saved me. But because it's mine. And because no one's taking it away again. She walked to the piano. And this time, she didn't play anything rehearsed. She made something up. On the spot. Notes that cracked. Notes that glowed. Notes that didn't sound like her mother or Carson or anyone else. Just her. By the time she finished, no one clapped. They just stood. And it was enough. That night, she finally uploaded the song. The real one. Not with captions or headlines or hashtags. Just a title. What Survives the Fire? And a single description. For anyone who ever had to sing through silence. She didn't stay up to watch the views climb. She didn't care if it went viral. Because for the first time since the fire, Tiana Graves was no longer a secret. She wasn't a symbol. She wasn't a warning. She was a voice. Clear. Unbroken. Unfinished. Still writing. Still singing. Still here. And that was the whole story. Thank you for following Tiana's journey. If her story moved you, share it. Speak up. Keep listening. And never, ever let your voice be taken from you.